Hello, this is Adam Feinberg, and you are listening to Harlem Stories. Welcome and thank you again for joining us. Today, I am also joined with my co-host, Mark Becker.
Great to see you, Adam.
Awesome. Well, today on Store, we're going to talk about the old 32nd Precinct building and the former stables in Carmansville. And, everyone is probably wondering, Carmansville, where's that? Never heard of it. Well, it's kind of for a loss of words here to exactly explain it, but it's sort of a lost neighborhood in a way, sort of, not really, kind of. So I've heard lots of versions of where the former neighborhood of Carmansville was, located, but as Richard F. Carman, he'd purchased a great amount of land in Upper Manhattan. I've heard various stories. I've heard somewhere around 125th Street near the Hudson in Washington Heights, somewhere near what is now known as Highbridge Park. But the most credible location for this little town neighborhood was in Hamilton Heights, bordering the Trinity Cemetery and the John James Audubon's property. It's true that Richard Carman did own property around Highbridge Park near the Jumel Mansion, but this section of land was not likely part of the Carmansville neighborhood. The building that was created to be the 32nd Precinct, and I think we'll probably spend most of our conversation here on this particular building and its stable. The building was created for the 32nd Precinct, was located at 1854 Amsterdam Avenue, which is today at 152nd and Amsterdam. Its jail and horse stables were officially recognized to be the center of the village of Carmansville. The former 32nd Precinct building is an individual landmark of New York City. The playground across the street from the 32nd Precinct, which is now the 30th Precinct, named the Carmansville Playground, and includes the basketball courts, best known as the Battlegrounds. The Battlegrounds were where basketball legends like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar learned to play. Even if you were a professional basketball player and you participated in a game at the Battlegrounds, you were expected to give it your all, one of the hardest non-pro games a player could participate in. The village of Carmansville was founded in or around 1840. Richard F. Carman was a poor boy who grew up making packing boxes for merchants. He moved up through the ranks over time from carpenter to builder, and due to the Great Fire of 1835, he moved up the ranks to contractor to real estate speculator. We know that Carman was buying land in Upper Manhattan as early as 1836, shortly before John James Audubon purchased a large tract, an area now known as the Audubon Historic District. And we've actually had an episode on the Audubon Historic District. Carman purchased roughly 23 acres of land between Amsterdam and 12th Avenue and 153rd and 155th Street, which he sold to Trinity Church for their new cemetery. By the 1860s, Audubon's widow had subdivided her property into a development of country seats, sharing in the rural pleasures of a broad woodland stretch along the river. Audubon Park, as it was known as a wealthy middle-class enclave of substantial freestanding houses in a picturesque landscape setting. Some of the houses were best known as best used as summer retreats, but the majority of the homes were commuters who traveled to the city. I mean, imagine, traveling to the city. You are in the city today. But they traveled to the city proper via the Hudson River Railway, which had its Carmansville station at the foot of 152nd Street. While the station is long gone, Amtrak still has trains that run upstate along the Hudson, likely close or to around that same location. The village included a butcher, a grocer, blacksmith, hotel, and several churches clustered around the cemetery. So that's why, we believe that's really where the village of Carmansville was.
Where did this guy Carman originally get all his money? Do we know that?
Yeah. Well, and that's what I mentioned before. He grew up making packing boxes. And then, as a result of the Great Fire, fire of 1835, he became a carpenter and then eventually moved up, became a builder, and as a contractor, and then ultimately made enough money to become a real estate speculator. So yeah, we do know that. So, this new police station that they wound up building, it helps to understand a little better, to understand how the police evolved in New York City. And I think that's really kind of helps describe it, because it wasn't the formal kind of organization that we know today. Up until the time of a new law of 1844, New York City's policemen had a different day job and only patrolled the streets on alternative nights. The city's police force received its first set of written rules in 1845, the regulations for day and night police of the city of New York, with instructions as to the legal powers and duties of policemen. Police officers received a copper badge shaped like an 8-pointed star and were sometimes nicknamed the Star Police or Coppers. So that's where that term coppers comes from. Full uniforms weren't adopted until 1853. A blue coat with an MP for municipal police. So anybody that watched like the Gangs of New York, they referred to the municipal police and the various different police departments back then. Well, that's where this came from. So the municipal police, they had the MP on the collar. They had gray trousers with a narrow black stripe on the outer edge of each leg, and a 22-inch long baton. A telegraph line connection was built in the early 1850s between the police chief and the precincts. A new police force under the control of New York State was established in 1852 to deal with the increasing crime in the city, and was called the Metropolitan Police. So you had the fights between the Metropolitan Police and municipal police. New York's municipal force was still in existence, but was intended to be phased out. The two forces often clashed over turf, but eventually the Metropolitan force won out. Some precincts had more than one station house. And that station house was staffed with an inspector, a captain, 4 sergeants, patrolmen, and officers. So that describes a little bit about their structure. Architect Nathaniel Bush was hired to modernize station houses. He had an office at police headquarters on Mulberry Street, which I believe is now a co-op building.
Really?
And actually, I've seen, like, you probably have seen the listings, Mark. There are apartments in that building that have like domes in the apartment.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really cool building. But that was the former police headquarters on Mulberry Street. Bush designed over 20 renovated station houses for the city's police force in the 1860s and 70s. The force was restructured after the 1870 Tweed Charter, returning police powers to the restored municipal police, governed by 4 commissioners appointed by the mayor. The number of commissioners rose to 5 in 1873. Telephone lines replaced the telegraph lines by 1880. And the first women joined the force in 1888. The 4 were assigned as precinct matrons. And when the 5 boroughs became one city in 1898, the New York Police Department combined 18 smaller police forces. So I think that's kind of interesting, the way that, the police force ultimately formed. But Nathaniel Bush, who became the official architect for New York's police department, designed the new building for the 32nd Precinct in 1870. Their earlier station house was a small 3-story brick building with no jail space. In the 1870s, the new building was built in the same spot on land bought in 1864 in the New York suburb of Carmansville. So now that's kind of, confirming what I was saying earlier about Carmansville being located, right by this police precinct.
Now, you mentioned the telephone wires replaced telegraph wires. Was that above ground?
Yeah, that was above ground.
But they're all buried now, right, in Manhattan?
As far as I know, they're all buried in Manhattan. I don't recall seeing any. But then again, I don't know. There could be small little pockets where it might not be.
Maybe in Inwood or.
That's actually what I was thinking too, where Inwood was less formally developed. So maybe there. But yeah, I mean, the rest of the city, it's kind of like, I remember I worked for my parents' business in the 90s, and while I was going to NYU, and I did a research study on behalf of their business, which what they did was they actually created supply line cleaner for septic tanks. And there were actual still septic tanks in Manhattan, believe it or not, in the 1990s. Now there were less than 10, but but there were some septic tanks still remaining in Manhattan. I don't know if any still remain to this day, but yeah, that was certainly interesting.
If there are, they're ready to get pumped.
Yeah, oh yeah, sure. I can imagine maybe in like some of these museum grounds or something like that. You know, maybe that's like the case, like the farmhouse in Inwood, things like that. I could see that as a possibility. But going back to the new building, the new police building, the Nathaniel Bush was building this out. A full basement was now created as a result. It was surrounded now by a wrought iron fence, and the lanterns that once flanked the doorways and decorative urns atop the cast iron cornice have since been removed. Makes sense. Over the years, a lot had changed. Wow. There are central pavilions in the upper story of the mansard roof, flanked by metal petriment windows. The new building for the 32nd Precinct was finished in 1872 and included a brick stable for the 14 horses and jail space. And I can tell you today, actually, one of my neighbors owned the garage that it was turned into from the former stable building. They have since sold, and it's been turned into a co-working space. Wow. So kind of cool. And Manhattanville Coffee actually has a location inside the co-working space. Huh. Good stuff. So kind of interesting how things have evolved and been reused, but it was originally space for 14 horses and jail space. The mounted police were part of the 32nd's force and of over 70 men and by the 1880s. And the former precinct house was designated a New York City landmark in 1982. By that time, it was owned by St. Luke African Methodist Episcopal Church. The church building is 1 block north of the station house. But by 2006, the former precinct was being used by the church for the self-help program, and the church rents out space in the building for medical offices. I know I've also seen a nonprofit group there over the years as well. The main building, it didn't contain a jail, a reflection of the suburban serenity of the area. Indeed, there was so little crime that a contemporary description of this section of Manhattan makes the surprising criticism that may all seem peaceful and rural enough, but in the shadow of the mossy hillocks, the eye may occasionally detect the intrusive uniform of the Metropolitan Police. The new jail building had also lodging space for vagrants, the 19th century solution for sheltering New York's homeless. So, interestingly enough, the first story contains the office, the captain and sergeant's sleeping apartments, each with full bathrooms, so that was interesting, and the men's sitting room, where the second and third floors are occupied by 2 large sleeping rooms, fully furnished with closets for the different sections of the platoons and 2 small dormitories for their roundsmen. The 4th floor is an immense drill room, and the rear of the lot in each case is covered by a smaller building.
What's a drill room?
I guess where they're practicing like police drills and.
So it's not where they keep their drills.
No, I don't think so. The upper floors, which are divided into 2 components for the reception for male and female lodgers, and the lower portion into cells for the prisoners. Now, the next part I want to mention over here, this is not my language. This was what was used previously and considered now.
Are you going to be a potty mouth?
I'm not going to be a potty mouth, but I am going to be politically incorrect because this is the language that
Let me put my helmet on.
Yeah. As the neighborhood developed, there was a juvenile asylum, a school for the blind, and another for the deaf and dumb. So yeah, definitely not politically correct in today's world, but this is as it was labeled back then. And as well for the homeschool for sailors' children of all things, I guess because they were on the Hudson. Wow. So there were a few factories, including a sugar refinery and an ironworks. And most notably right there is the Joseph Loth and Company building, which still stands today, just south of the station house, originally manufactured silk ribbon and had approximately somewhere in the neighborhood of about 600 employees by the early 1890s. And they were actually massive. I mean, not just the 600 employees, which was massive for that time, but they were one of the largest silk ribbon manufacturers in the nation and in the world. So, pretty significant. So now this is where it kind of starts getting a little bit more interesting, though, and a little bit more controversial. The precinct was in operation during the Boss Tweed era, and I know there's some scandalous stories out there relating to the 32nd precinct back in the day. As the stately station house, which the New York Times termed handsome, was rising, precinct captain Ellison Wilson's chief clerk, Seth C. Hawley, recognized an opportunity. He ordered the builders to work alternatively on erecting the station house and adding an addition to his own home. Wow, that's quite illegal. All at the expense of the police department. When the house was finished, a former painter turned policeman, Officer Gray, was posted for 3 months at Hawley's residence painting. So, Gapped at the new station house went even further. Captain Wilson, seeing the commodious accommodations of the new stable, he bought his own 4 horses from his private stable to be boarded there. And while the horses received free feed at the city's expense, he rented out the paddocks of his own stable for $30 a month per horse. So,
that's a pretty That's $1 a day.
Yeah, seriously, and that was a lot of money. That was like an entire day's earnings for some people during that period. So Chief Clerk Hawley bought 3 of his horses to the precinct stables as well, and a cow. Holy cow! So yeah, very, very illegal today. But obviously the public kind of felt the same back then as well, and they really had enough. And when it was discovered that Captain Wilson posted one of his patrolmen as a servant in the Wilson residence for 2 years and another as a liveryman in his private stables, attending to the horses in full uniform. Among the policemen in the new building was Patrolman Richard S. Eldridge. The other cops referred to him as Pops, and for several years he had been the truant officer in the neighborhood. In January 1885, Pops Eldridge was reassigned to regular patrol duty, and he had requested instead to be granted retirement. On January 24th, the 87-year-old policeman retired, believed to have been the oldest policeman in the United States. Not shocking, especially.
How old was he?
87. And obviously he was, on payroll, basically, for no real legitimate reason, but he was on the payroll. So it gives you a little sense of it. Not all the police stationed at the 32nd Precinct Station House were so gentle. When Officer John W. McMurray heard that Hugh Smith had reported him to the captain in December 1886, the officer hunted him down. Smith was clubbed severely, and when he escaped and jumped a fence, McMurray fired 2 shots at him. To calm himself down, the policeman entered a 10th Avenue saloon and bought a round of drinks. Unfortunately, John B. Nolan, he said something that had displeased McMurray, who then clubbed the man and took him to the station house. While Nolan was standing before the sergeant, McMurray clubbed him again. Wow, a lot of chaos there going on. Another officer, John Mara, sent word to the station house on January 3rd, 1888, that he was sick. Someone else would have to take up his spot. Captain Courtwright left to investigate. Sure enough, Mara had left his post at 115th Street and Courtwright and found him in a saloon, gloriously drunk. When the captain attempted to discipline the officer, Mara launched a savage attack on his superior. He was jailed and held for $300 bail. Then, get this, there was Officer M.J. McCauley, who then decided that rather than patrol on a beautiful day in June 1889, he would go boating instead. When he was noticed by passers-by, he jumped into the water and reported, soaking wet, to the precinct that he had just rescued drowning persons. The clever ploy did not convince his supervisors. So, that gives you the tales of, the old 32nd precinct. Ironically, it's it's located in the 30th precinct of Manhattan. And, if you look back in the history records or you've been in Manhattan long enough, especially in the 1990s, you may have heard of the Dirty 30. And that was, the 30th precinct police that were on the take. Corruption abound, and it was a massive bust of police officers. So today, if you ever hear the term Dirty 30, it regards to the vast majority of Hamilton Heights and their police force from the 1990s. But, again, we always like to give you interesting and historical, pop culture type of storylines and along with some of our broker tips along the ways. So always hope to give you great content. Again, we want to thank you for joining us with Harlem Stories.
Thanks, folks.